people were in exile. They had been living in Babylon for a long time. So many had gotten used to living there. Some even had jobs in the court of the king. Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, worked at the king's court. God blessed Daniel and his friends with learning, wisdom, and skill. One day, the king of Babylon had a dream. He saw a great shining figure. As he watched it, it fell apart and blew away in the wind. None of the king's wise men knew what it meant, but Daniel did. A time will come when all the kingdoms of the world will be destroyed, but God's kingdom will last forever. Another day, the king made a huge gold statue of a person. He commanded the people to bow down when they heard special music and worship the image. The people who did not obey would be thrown into a furnace full of fire. Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, would not worship the statue. So they were thrown into the blazing furnace. God sent an angel to keep them safe, and not a hair on their heads was burned in the fire. The king was amazed, so he gave the 3 friends a place of honor in his court. The king had another dream. The wise men of the court could not understand it, so they brought Daniel to the king again. The king had dreamed about a tree that touched the sky. It had beautiful leaves and branches. It had fruit on the branches. Animals found shelter under it, and its branches were full of birds. The Holy One came down from heaven and said, "Cut down the tree and let the animals flee and the birds fly away." Daniel prayed to God, and God showed him what it meant. Daniel told the king, "The tree you saw was you. You are great and strong like the tree, but you will be driven away from your people and live like an animal, eating grass for 7 long years." And the dream was true. The king was driven out and lived like an animal for 7 years. When he came back to his throne, he worshipped the one true God. After the king died, his sons began to rule. He did not know the one true God. One time, he held a great feast and used the holy things from the temple in Jerusalem that the Babylonians had brought to their own city. Suddenly, the people at the party saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the wall. The king could not read the writing, so he sent for Daniel. The words were Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin, which meant God will bring this king's rule to an end, and the kingdom of Babylon will be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night the king was killed, and King Darius took over. King Darius divided his new kingdom into 120 parts and placed 3 rulers over them. One of these 3 was Daniel. The other 2 rulers were jealous of Daniel. They knew he was the king's favorite and might one day rule over them. They decided to trick the king into making a law that Daniel could not keep. Everyone had to pray only to King Darius or be cast into a den of lions. They knew that Daniel worshipped the one true God, so he would never pray to a king. One day, Daniel was caught in his room, facing Jerusalem and praying to God. They brought him to the king. The king liked Daniel, but a law was a law. Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. The king worried about Daniel. In the morning, he ran to the lion's den and called to Daniel. Daniel answered, "I am fine. God sent an angel to protect me from the lions." The king was filled with gladness, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. Then the men who had accused Daniel were thrown into the lion's den instead, and all were killed. Daniel was honored throughout the kingdom, and he prospered all the rest of his life. Daniel also had visions and dreams himself. One time, Daniel dreamed that 4 great beasts came up out of the sea. The first was a lion and had eagle's wings. The second looked like a bear standing on its hind legs with 3 ribs in its mouth. The third was a leopard, but had 4 wings on its back and 4 heads. The last beast was more terrifying than the rest and very strong. It had great iron teeth and 10 horns. As he looked, another horn appeared, then rooted out 3 of the horns. As Daniel watched, this 4th beast was put to death. The others were not killed, but they lost all their powers. Then God appeared and ruled the rest forever. Daniel woke from his dream very troubled. He told his helper about all that he had seen. His helper told Daniel what it meant. He said, 4 kings will rise out of the earth, but their power will not last. It is God alone who will rule forever. Another time, Daniel had a vision of himself standing by a river. Beside him was a ram with 2 horns, one longer than the other. This ram charged all around, destroying everything in its path, and as it charged, it became stronger. As Daniel watched, a male goat appeared from the west. It was as if it were flying. The goat had a horn between the eyes. The goat charged the ram, breaking its 2 horns and trampling it on the ground. Daniel could not understand what he saw, but an angel named Gabriel came to him and told him that this was a vision of the end of all time. A king will rise, more powerful and evil than all the others. This dream frightened Daniel. Daniel prayed for many days, asking the Lord to forgive the people for their evil ways and to restore the great city of Jerusalem. Daniel remembered that the prophet Jeremiah had said that the city would be restored after 70 years, and yet it remained in pieces. One day, as he prayed, the angel Gabriel appeared to him. Gabriel said, "The Lord God has heard your prayers and has sent me to try and help you understand." Jeremiah meant 70 times 7, a much longer time than anyone imagined. This was because the sin of the people was so great. The words of the angel Gabriel filled Daniel with great sadness. He fasted for 3 weeks, and then God sent him another vision. This time, Daniel saw someone, like a man dressed in linen with a belt of gold around his waist. Daniel fell to the ground before him. A hand touched him and raised him up. The figure, like a man, said to Daniel, "Do not be afraid. Be strong and courageous. I have come to help you understand these visions." He told Daniel that the power of all kings will come to an end. He explained that this time will be difficult, but that God will stay close to God's people and deliver them from all danger. They will live with God forever. Then the figure like a man told Daniel to keep all these things secret, and he promised Daniel that all would be well for him and all of God's people.